I spent 7 years of my life restoring the family's crumbling estate, pouring in my own money, sweat, and dreams. It was supposed to be mine one day. But after my grandparents passed, my parents handed the $6.5 million house to my cousin, the same cousin who'd once filed for bankruptcy after crashing a luxury car in Vegas. And when I questioned it, they called me ungrateful, greedy, said I didn't deserve it. But they didn't know I had every receipt, every blueprint, every invoice, and a plan they'd never see coming. My name is Lindsay. I'm 34, an architect based in Denver. And for most of my life, I believed in loyalty, especially to family. It wasn't just something I said, it was something I lived. And nothing embodied that more than the house. The house. It wasn't just a house. It was a 1920s colonial estate tucked into the foothills just outside Boulder. A place filled with history, my grandparents' laughter echoing down the halls, the creak of the wooden stairs my cousins and I used to race up the warm smell of cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. It was the soul of our family. When I was 23, fresh out of grad school, my grandparents asked me to help renovate it. I had just earned my degree in architecture, and they saw potential in me not just as a designer, but as someone who understood the value of preservation. It started with little things, restoring the original oak flooring, redoing the crown molding by hand, repairing century-old stained glass windows. Then it grew. Walls came down. The kitchen, expanded solar panels, added with discreet placements. For 7 years, I poured my heart, my money, and every spare minute I had into making that house shine again. There were no formal agreements, just love, trust, family. I wasn't being paid. I didn't ask to be. My grandparents would always say, "One day, this house will be yours." And I believed them. More importantly, I didn't need the promise. I just needed to know I was part of something bigger, that I was doing right by them. My parents, on the other hand, were always more calculated. My dad is a retired corporate lawyer, the kind of man who treats family dinners like boardroom negotiations. My mom, she smiles in social settings and cuts you with silence when the guests leave. They lived in another state for most of my childhood, leaving me and my sister with my grandparents for long stretches. And although they praised me to their friends, Lindsay, our architect daughter, restoring the family legacy, they never once offered to help. Not with time, not with money, not even with emotional support. Still, I didn't let it bother me. I thought they were just hands-off, not malicious. Then there was Evan, my cousin. Evan was always the golden boy, even when he didn't deserve to be. Reckless, entitled, the kind of guy who thought charm could cover up failure. He dropped out of college, burned through 2 trust funds, and once asked our grandmother to co-sign a loan for a business idea he found on Reddit. When she said no, he didn't speak to her for 6 months. Evan lived big and crashed hard. A DUI at 27. Bankrupt by 30, after investing in some NFT scheme. But somehow, he always landed on his feet. My aunt and uncle bailed him out time and time again, and my parents often chimed in with vague talk about second chances and not giving up on family. I meanwhile was slowly transforming the family estate into a masterpiece. I documented everything not for legal reasons, but because that's how I worked. I kept architectural renderings, timelines, receipts for reclaimed materials, permits, photos of every phase of the rebuild. I was proud of it, and I treated the project with the same respect I gave my professional clients. When my grandparents passed, within a year of each other, Grandma first, then Grandpa, I was devastated. They had been my anchor, my second parents. The house felt different without them. Quieter, but also more mine somehow. Like their spirit still lingered, waiting for me to finish what I started. So when the time came to read the will, I expected nothing fancy. I knew the house was still technically under my grandfather's name, but I assumed the transition would be simple, some paperwork, maybe a quiet acknowledgement from my parents that I'd earned it. Instead, I got a phone call. No ceremony, no reading. Just my mother's clipped voice saying, "The house has been transferred to Evan. He's moving in next month." Just like that. At first, I thought it was a joke. I waited for a laugh, for someone to say, "Gotcha." But no, they were serious, dead serious. I remember standing in the middle of the kitchen I designed with reclaimed Carrara marble, the one Evan once mocked me for spending too much time on, and staring at the backsplash. I had hand-laid every single tile. Why, I asked. "He needs a fresh start," my dad said. "He's been through a lot," my mom added, "but I rebuilt this house." "It wasn't yours to begin with," they said. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Everything I had done, the years of work, the money, the devotion, meant nothing. They handed it over like a party favor to the cousin who once tried to list a family heirloom on eBay. And that's when I realized something even worse. They didn't just overlook me. They didn't value me at all. After that call, I didn't sleep for days. I tried to stay calm, to convince myself it was all just a huge misunderstanding. I combed through my old emails with Grandpa. I reread his messages about our legacy project and how proud he was of the work I'd done. I found photos of him and me standing in the garden after we installed the pergola, his arm around me, eyes full of quiet pride. How could that all just vanish? I called my parents again, hoping they'd walk it back. "Maybe you were pressured," I asked my mother gently. "Maybe you didn't realize how much I'd invested in the house." "You're being dramatic," she said flatly. "We didn't think you'd be so possessive." Possessive. That word hit me like a slap. I had given up vacations, skipped promotions, turned down out-of-state clients to stay close and finish the project. But now, I was possessive. I asked about the will, about legal documentation. My father got cold. "It was transferred through a quitclaim deed before your grandfather passed. It's done. Don't embarrass yourself." They didn't even invite me to the signing. No family meeting, no conversation. Just a backdoor legal move and a shrug. When I pressed further, my dad grew aggressive. "You're not entitled to anything. You didn't buy the house. You didn't inherit it. Grow up." I hung up the phone with shaking hands. The next week, Evan moved in. I wasn't there for it, but my friend Rachel, who lived down the street, texted me photos. Evan standing in the driveway with sunglasses and a Starbucks cup, giving a two-finger salute to the movers. He had a new girlfriend in tow. Blonde, Instagram model type. She wore stilettos on the gravel and kept asking where the wine fridge was. That house wasn't ready for them. It wasn't a party palace. It was sacred. My grandparents' some souls still lived in those walls. But Evan didn't care. Within days, he started redecorating. He painted over the mural I'd commissioned for the library, removed the reading nook, installed a hot tub right over the koi pond my grandfather had hand-built. My cousin posted a tour of the new crib on TikTok, complete with hashtags like hashtag new beginnings and level up. I watched it in disbelief as he bragged about transforming an old fixer-upper into a millionaire's escape. He never mentioned me. Not once. Neither did my parents. They didn't reach out. Not to explain, not to comfort, not to check in. The silence grew louder than any insult could. When I finally cracked and sent a long email laying out my contributions, my time, my money, they didn't even reply. Instead, my sister called me the next day and said, "Mom's really upset. She says you're acting entitled." Entitled. That word again. I asked my sister, "Do you think I'm wrong to be hurt?" She paused, then said, "I think you're making it hard for everyone." And that's when it clicked. I wasn't just being ignored, I was being cast out, rewritten as the villain in my own story. In their version, I was the selfish one, the bitter one, the dramatic one who couldn't just move on. What followed was worse than any open argument. They started excluding me from family events. A cousin's baby shower. No invite. My aunt's anniversary dinner. "We thought you wouldn't want to come." Even holiday cards stopped arriving. I became a ghost. And not a single person, not even extended family, asked why. I wasn't sure which part hurt more, losing the house or realizing how easily my family erased me. Every conversation felt like a landmine. When I did manage to get my mother on the phone, she said things like, "I thought you were more mature than this," or "You've always had a hard time letting go." Once she even said, "We gave Evan the house because he needed it more." "You're already successful. Why do you want to take from someone who's struggling?" I didn't want to take anything. I wanted them to see me, to acknowledge what I had done, to honor the work, the love, the time. Instead, they twisted the narrative. I was greedy, ungrateful, obsessive. The final blow came when Evan posted a throwback photo on Instagram of the house during its renovation. My renovation. He captioned it, "Funny how some people think hard work means throwing money at old problems. I guess some of us just have vision." That post got over 30,000 likes. He turned my 7-year journey into a punchline for clout. And I realized then, he wasn't just careless, he was calculated. He wanted credit, he wanted the story, and my parents, whether out of guilt, favoritism, or cowardice, gave it to him. For a while, I shut down completely. I stopped answering calls, stopped going on social media. I buried myself in work, trying to forget that the most meaningful thing I'd ever created had been taken from me and handed to someone who treated it like a content backdrop. But grief has a way of reshaping itself. And one day, while organizing files for a client, I came across a folder labeled Everest House, my name for the project. It was filled with documentation, floor plans, before and after shots, contractor contracts, bank transfers, all in my name, all time-stamped, all legally traceable. And that's when the fog began to clear. They thought they'd erased me. They had no idea I'd kept every receipt. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m., going through every file I had ever created for the Everest House. My fingers trembled as I clicked through folder after folder, architectural drafts, contractor emails, itemized, renovation costs, even handwritten notes from Grandpa taped to the back of blueprint pages. I had documented everything. At the time, I wasn't thinking about protecting myself. I just wanted a record of the journey, of our shared dream. But now, it felt like a lifeline. I printed out 100 pages, then 200. I filled 3 manila folders. I took photos of receipts, scanned contracts, saved voice messages from vendors. Every ounce of my labor, every brick, every redesign, it was all there. I didn't even realize how meticulous I had been until I saw it laid out in front of me. 7 years of my life, on paper, undeniable, and still, I hesitated. What was I really going to do? Sue my own parents, drag my cousin into court, open myself up to even more judgment, more accusations of being vindictive. I called my best friend Ellie. She listened quietly as I talked through everything. The deed transfer, the accusations, the digital erasure of my contributions. At the end, she asked one question. If this had happened to someone else, what would you tell them to do? I didn't even have to think about it. Fight. That same week, I met with a property attorney named Monica. She was sharp, calm, and had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. I showed her my documents, explained the timeline, and told her about the quit-claim deed. She flipped through the folders with practiced precision. Then she looked up and said, "You have a real case here." Just hearing that made something inside me break. I cried, not because I was happy, but because someone finally believed me. Over the next month, we built the case. Monica explained that while a quit-claim deed is legally binding, it doesn't override fraudulent behavior. If it could be proven that the transfer was done under manipulation, misrepresentation, or if the ownership was knowingly shifted without proper consideration or consent from contributing parties, it could be challenged. Especially with tangible investment from someone like me, we filed a civil claim to dispute the deed transfer and seek a restitution of ownership. When the papers were served, my parents were livid. My father left a voicemail that lasted 5 minutes, oscillating between fury and disappointment. "How dare you drag this family into court? This is disgusting, Lindsay. We raised you better than this. I don't even recognize who you are anymore." But the truth was, I'd never felt more like myself. The fallout was immediate. Extended family members started calling me, some supportive, most awkward. My aunt said, "This could all be handled privately." My uncle said, "It's just a house." A cousin texted me, "You're better than this, aren't you?" Apparently I wasn't. And the worst part, Evan, he didn't respond legally at first. Instead, he went to the court of public opinion. He posted an 8-minute video on YouTube titled, "When Family Turns on You, My 6.5M Nightmare." He cried on camera, said he was trying to rebuild his life after bankruptcy, that he finally had something stable and now his own cousin was trying to rip it away out of jealousy. He shared photos of the house looking vibrant and modern, making sure to cut out all references to me. He said things like, "I'm just trying to heal from trauma, and we're all doing the best we can." And people believed him. He gained 40,000 followers overnight. His girlfriend made TikToks about the toxic cousin drama. One of them went viral. I found myself being messaged by strangers. Some called me selfish. Some told me to let it go. A few threatened me. I stayed off the internet for weeks, but I didn't back down. We pushed forward, Depositions were scheduled. Monica subpoenaed financial records. She dug into the timing of the deed transfer and uncovered something explosive. Evan had declared bankruptcy after the quitclaim was signed, but before it was finalized. That timing suggested one thing: the house was being used to shield assets from creditors. A fraud tactic. It was no longer just about me. It was now a legal storm. That's when my parents switched tactics. Instead of anger, they tried guilt. My mother showed up unannounced to my office. She looked thinner, tired. She sat across from me and said, "You're hurting everyone. Is that what you want? To tear this family apart?" I stared at her, stunned. "I am hurt, Mom, but no one cared when it was me. You didn't even ask if I was okay." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't know it meant that much to you," she whispered. "You did," I said. "You just didn't care enough to say no to him." She didn't deny it. The day of the preliminary hearing, I walked into court wearing the navy suit Grandpa gave me for my first job interview. My hands were cold, my chest tight. Evan arrived 10 minutes late in a blazer and jeans chewing gum. His lawyer looked like he had prepared for a parking ticket, not a multi-million-dollar dispute. But Monica was a force. She laid out every detail: my financial contributions, my logged hours, the value I added to the property. She showed the timeline of renovations, highlighted the transfer paperwork, and exposed the bankruptcy timing. Then she did something brilliant. She played a voicemail from Grandpa, one I'd saved years ago. In it, he said, "Lindsay, this house wouldn't be standing without you. I hope you know this will always be yours. You earned that." You could hear the emotion in his voice, the sincerity, the trust. The courtroom went silent. Evan's lawyer objected, said it was sentimental hearsay, but the judge let it stand as context. For the first time in months, I felt seen. Evan, for his part, squirmed. He tried to argue that the renovations were his idea, that he had guided the vision. Monica pulled up his own Instagram post from 2 years ago where he wrote, "Shout out to my cousin Lindsay for making this place a dream." I had no clue what I was doing, LOL. He looked like he wanted to disappear. When the hearing ended, the judge ordered a temporary hold on all financial activities related to the house. An investigation was opened into the bankruptcy claim, and both parties were instructed to enter mediation. That night, I went home and cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of it all, of being doubted, betrayed, gaslit. Then slowly, methodically, clawing my way back to the truth. Mediation was rough. My parents attended one session. My father sat with his arms crossed the entire time. When asked if he understood the damage done, he said, "She's a grown woman. She should have known nothing is ever guaranteed." Evan offered to let me design the guest house if I dropped the case. I laughed. 3 months passed. Then in a closed session with the judge, the decision came. The deed transfer was declared invalid due to deceptive intent and lack of proper consideration. The house was ordered to be returned to me. Evan was given 30 days to vacate. His bankruptcy case was re-examined, and a separate civil suit was opened against him for fraudulent filing. I won. But the victory was hollow. My parents didn't call. My sister sent me a single text. "Well, you got what you wanted." No congratulations. No apology. When I arrived at the house again, my house, it was gutted. The mural was gone. The koi pond filled in with cement. The garden overgrown. Trash bags littered the garage. It was like walking through a dream that had curdled into a nightmare. I stood in the center of the empty living room and listened to the silence. Then I whispered, "I'm sorry, Grandpa." I tried to protect it, but even in that devastation, something stirred. Not rage, not sadness, resolve. I wasn't going to restore it for me anymore. I was going to restore it for others, for every woman who had been erased, overlooked, silenced. The Everest house wasn't just a memory. It was going to become a legacy. 2 weeks after reclaiming the Everest house, I sat at the old dining room table, one of the few things Evan hadn't destroyed, and sketched out a new blueprint. But this time, it wasn't a redesign for luxury or resale. It was a blueprint for purpose. I was done fighting to be seen by my family. Now, I was building something for people who had never been seen at all. The first thing I did was apply to register the house as a nonprofit, historical, and community space. I named it the Inheritance Project. The mission to support women, especially daughters who'd been pushed out of their rightful legacy financially or emotionally. We would offer temporary housing legal workshops, estate planning support, and free architectural consultations for women rebuilding their lives. I funded the renovations myself, using the same savings I'd once used to bring this house back from the brink. But this time, I wasn't alone. When I put the call out for volunteers, dozens of women showed up. One woman told me she'd been cut out of her father's will for refusing to give up college. Another said her brother sold the family farm without telling her. They painted walls, rebuilt the garden, fixed the plumbing. We were angry. We were heartbroken. But we were rebuilding brick by brick together. Word spread. A local journalist ran a story, "Architect Turns Betrayal into Safe Haven." Then another. Then a podcast invited me on to talk about estate abuse and inheritance injustice. I told my story, not to shame my family, but to validate the people who were still afraid to speak up. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. A bankruptcy fraud investigator reached out. They'd been reviewing Evan's filings and found multiple inconsistencies, not just with the house, but with assets he'd hidden in crypto, a luxury car under his girlfriend's name, and fake debt payments to a consulting company that didn't exist. He wasn't just greedy, he was criminal. The government opened a formal investigation. Evan was charged with multiple counts of bankruptcy fraud and ordered to appear in court. I didn't need to be part of that trial, but they asked if I wanted to submit a victim impact statement. I did. In that statement, I laid everything bare. How he'd smiled at me while lying. How he erased me digitally and emotionally. How he leveraged trauma as a branding tool while knowingly stealing the work and home I'd built. But more than that, I wrote about what it meant to be the good daughter. The one who's quiet, helpful, respectful. The one who never causes a scene. And how predators, even in your own bloodline, thrive on that silence. It wasn't just theft. It was erasure. And I was done being erased. The judge sentenced Evan to 18 months in prison and ordered restitution for the fraudulent assets. It wasn't a life sentence, but it was accountability. And it sent a message being family doesn't put you above the law. My parents didn't attend the sentencing. They still hadn't spoken to me since the ruling. Occasionally, I'd get an email from my mother, short, stiff things like, "Hope you're doing well," or "Let us know if you want to come for Christmas," like nothing had ever happened. But I didn't respond. I wasn't angry anymore. I had simply outgrown them. They had chosen silence. I had chosen truth. And truth, no matter how painful, was the stronger legacy. By the end of the year, the Everest House reopened as the Inheritance Project Center for Women. We hosted our first estate planning seminar, led by a brilliant young attorney who herself had fought her way out of financial abuse. We converted the old guest wing into temporary shelter space for women fleeing inheritance-related coercion. And we built a digital archive of testimonials from daughters and granddaughters across the country. The first time a young woman told me, "I didn't know anyone else had gone through this until I found your story," I nearly cried, because that was the point. I had spent so long thinking I was alone, but I never was, and neither were they. I don't know if my parents will ever understand what they did. I don't know if Evan will ever feel remorse. But I do know this: every single time I walk past the staircase I rebuilt, or the mural I repainted by hand, or the koi pond now teeming with life again, I remember who I am. Not just a daughter, not just an architect, but a builder of something that can't be stolen. Legacy. One quiet Sunday morning, I stood in the garden of Everest House sipping coffee from the old mug I'd rescued from the attic. The roses were blooming again, my grandmother's favorites. I had just finished planting them the week before, in the exact pattern she used when I was a child. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. Not the kind of home you inherit through blood, the kind you reclaim through truth. Inside, a woman was making breakfast in the shared kitchen. A mother of two, escaping a toxic custody battle where her in-laws tried to claim her children because she wasn't contributing enough. Upstairs, a young college grad was drafting her first will after her uncle tried to steal the land her father left her. Their laughter echoed through the hallway like a hymn of resilience. This was what I had built, not with permission, not with approval, but with intention, and no one could take that away. A few months later, I received a letter from my father. It wasn't handwritten, just a typed note, folded neatly, with my name misspelled at the top. He wrote that he hoped I was finding peace, and that they were sorry if things had gotten out of hand. He ended it with, "We did what we thought was best for the family." I didn't reply, because this was best for the family, at least the one I chose to build. The final line of the letter struck me, though. He wrote, "You always were the stubborn one, maybe. Or maybe I was just the one who finally stopped pretending that love should be earned through silence." I folded the letter, tucked it in a drawer, and walked back into the garden toward a future that looked nothing like the past, but felt more like me than anything that had ever come before.